Welcome to Crime Curious. I'm Charnell.
And I'm Megan.
And welcome to part 2. You ready to shake?
I am ready to shake the green. Well, how can you shake?
I got to put my dicks back. I'm sorry.
Why do you? Why
I
are
was
your penises
charging
out?
them. This is the part 1 episode. I was fondling them and I took them out to charge in the sun.
And we are so superstitious that now that she has recharged phalluses, now we're going to shake our gree. I have the bones.
And I've got the crystal penises in the kangaroo sack.
All right.
If you're new here, Jesus, sorry.
And we keep our phallus calendar here that we were provided by a lovely Patreon and listener as well. So we're surrounded by all of our juju.
We have very, very hard juju. It's wonderful for us.
But it's good juju. The gree is giving us good juju.
Thank you.
Say that 3 times fast.
I cannot.
I don't know. My tongue swelled up that time.
I'm thoroughly enjoying you telling me stories, my friend.
Good. I'm glad.
You're doing a wonderful job.
Well, that's why you only get a few of these from me and Charnell brings you most of them because I'm here for your entertainment and for your questions. And when I actually dive into a case, the lawyer brain in me, it's always deep. It is always a deep dive. Right. It's bad for me to do these, but I love it.
It's a good balance though of doing some short cases, doing deep dives.
And like I said, if anybody totally hates the anatomy of a trial that I'm giving them in these cases, they can let me know.
Yeah, well, and I'm loving it, and that's all that really matters. You're entertaining me.
Good.
No, seriously though, I think people are really going to like this, and I think you've done a fabulous job, and I can't wait to hear the rest.
Most of the credit from the first one went to ABC News in 2020. This, I'm actually going to shout this out because I think it's incredibly important. Going through and reviewing transcripts, which can get tedious as well, and then looking at overviews. So complete coverage of the Thomas Clayton murder trial is given, I'm going to give her all the credit, to Times Warner cable news reporter Tina Yazdani. This woman did a blog.
Wow.
And this blog covered minute to minute of this trial.
Tina.
Wow. All the credit to her.
Great
if anybody
job.
wants to, fact check this part or this trial, all you have to do is look up Tina's article. And this is almost 100% where I got this information from, only because I went back through and fact checked her as I would and looked up some trial testimony and then looked up, I actually read the appeal, which I'll get to in a minute and have for you as well. So credit to Tina. I don't know if she's still out there and reporting, but
sure.
She probably is because this is 2017.
Also, if you haven't listened to part 1, you need to because you're not going to understand anything.
Otherwise, we are jumping in on a murder for hire trial and you just missed one whole trial.
Yep, exactly. Okay. So where are we picking up, my friend?
January 9th, 2017.
Jeez, oh, Pete's.
Yep. So we are about a year and 3 months from when Kelley Clayton was tragically murdered in her own home with her children present. So her husband, Thomas Clayton's trial begins on this date. Jury selection, I should state, begins. Well, throughout Beard's trial, this is Michael Beard, who we covered in the first part. Jurors heard evidence that linked Thomas Clayton to the crime. So we've heard a lot already of what's going to come up in this trial. So phone records show an alleged call made between the two men on the night of the murder. Thomas has always maintained his innocence through his counsel. In prior court appearances, the defense argued officers targeted Thomas from the very beginning. The defense also says there's no actual evidence indicating Clayton ever hired Beard to kill his wife. You guys, and here's the part I'm going to tell you. These are hard. This is hard.
Cash.
Because you have those things, you have these promises. Is a jury going to find beyond a reasonable doubt that all of those things tied together are enough to show that there was an agreement made?
I get that.
Okay.
I get that.
Thomas Clayton,
have the tangible proof.
Thomas Clayton at this point in time is not guilty. He's a man on trial who believes verbally, in his opinion, that his wife was murdered by Michael Beard, who was a former disgruntled employee of his.
Right.
That's what he is
and that
indicating.
He's being set up, essentially, by Michael Beard.
So jury selection went all the way from January 9th to January 11th. It's actually not an incredible amount of time on these cases. Right. It's weird for us here in Michigan, at least in this county, because when we start a trial, jury selection usually happens the first day. Okay.
It's tedious, by the way.
And, these trials that go on for days and days that you're hearing about and that I'm telling you about now, they don't do that here because we don't do any other business during the day and we don't do multiple cases at once. If there's a large homicide jury trial, you're going to get scheduled for 3 days.
Yeah.
Maybe 4. If it's a really big one with hundreds of witnesses like this, you might have got the week. Okay. And that's how it would work. But we just wouldn't do any other business in the meantime to get it done. It was incredibly hard to seat a jury.
Oh, I bet.
Okay. Finding somebody in this small town that hadn't heard of the case.
Right.
They went through one group of 100 jurors with 0 people being selected from that jury pool. And then they brought in another 100. Finally, they seated 10 men and 2 women and had a pool of 3 alternates. I mentioned it in the first trial too. Y'all, we always see alternates in trials, especially trials this big, because if something happens to one of the jurors, you don't want a mistrial. No. You don't want to try it all over. And they are listening the whole time.
Yes. They are present the whole time. They're acting as jurors. They just don't actually get to vote unless they...
In New York, it would appear that they know they're alternates. Here, and when we run a trial, if you pick an alternate, no one knows who the alternate is until the last day of the trial before they deliberate. We go through a little, pick out the lucky bingo number, juror number 13. You're excused. Can you imagine? You've sat through weeks and weeks as a juror.
I didn't realize
that's how we do it here.
It wasn't like that everywhere.
You don't know you're the alternate. In our cases, and I kind of like it because you have to pay attention. You can't sit there and think, well, I'm an alternate.
That's how I
I'm
thought
not going
it
to make a
was
decision.
everywhere.
No.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
So on January 12th at 3:19 p.m., don't worry, I'm not going to give you every minute, but I want for dramatic pause.
Just know that it is that detailed.
It is so detailed that I have every almost minute listed on here. The prosecution gives its opening statements. DA Whedon Westmore he speaks for 90 minutes going through his evidence. Opening statements, I think I've told you before in other cases, but I'm going to tell you again, these have a theoretical purpose. Yeah. They are to sum up and explain to the jury what it is they intend that they're going to hear and what they're going to prove, what they're going to show. Right. They are not evidence. Right. Any statements made by attorneys in the case, period, opening, closing, or even objections are not and are never evidence.
No. I relate this to when you pick up a new book and you read the synopsis on the back of the book. Yeah. That's like what opening statements are.
It is. You didn't get any evidence.
Nope.
Got the overview.
Yeah.
Then jurors heard from the defense attorney in their opening statements, and I'm not going through these at length because otherwise I'd be giving you all the good evidence that's going to come out, and you'd have to have suspense here. Right. He simply said the prosecutor's facts are bogus.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. The first witness to testify in Thomas Clayton's murder trial, in Kelley's murder trial, was Thomas and Kelley's neighbor. So again, this is the guy that goes to the house the night of the murder. Okay. He testified
when he took his kids over to
and then
the neighbor's
house.
Yep. And the neighbor
he testified that before entering the house that night, his Thomas Clayton had told him, "I warn you, it's gruesome." The neighbor says Thomas was agitated, highly emotional, and was rocking back and forth and couldn't even take a drink of water. The neighbor said he just wanted to get out of the house. And when officers arrived, they instructed him to wait outside. After the neighbor was done testifying, the second witness was called. She was the paramedic who determined that Kelley Clayton was dead. She said there was significant trauma to her face. And then about the other injuries, the things that she saw. This is the state, by the way, that remember you saw Kelley's sister and her family saw. And Kelley's brother-in-law, who was Kim's husband, he actually was the third witness called, and he testified that he and Kelley's sister arrived at the house the night they were killed. She was killed. My God. He told jurors that Kelley's sister, Kim, was hysterical and screaming for her sister, and that this scene was like straight out of a movie. Horrible. He continued.
Can I just point something out that I was thinking about in part 1? Yeah. I know we're not supposed to do this, but I think that a lot of us would. You mentioned that she was found naked from the waist down. Yes. And her husband never covers her up. Right. I'm just thinking that is one piece that we consistently hear that I, as a human, if I stumbled upon someone I love dearly,
you cover their genitals.
You cover their genitals.
Private parts, right?
Yes.
There's going to be testimony about that.
Oh, okay. All right.
No, don't.
Really?
I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
I will note, nowhere in here does it state anything about a sexual assault.
Okay.
Because people often hear nude and they think sexual assault.
Right. And I figured you would have got there in part one.
And there may have been, in my siphoning of medical records, there may have been evidence, of course, of some type of intercourse, but she was probably having consensual sex with her husband. Right. There was no sign of a sexual assault.
Okay.
And I don't believe that there were there was nothing very recent, like no semen or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So Kelley's brother-in-law, he continued to testify that Thomas enjoyed gambling. He kept large amounts of cash in the home, and that Thomas would often help him work on homes free of charge. He said Thomas was generous with his resources. So he didn't say tons of bad things, just what they rolled up on. Mm-hmm. Holly Beard is Michael Beard's wife, who was convicted in the first one.
Yes.
She testified that day. She testified that she and Michael needed money, and they were concerned about paying rent. And Holly also testified that she and Michael lived in an apartment owned by Thomas, and he was their landlord. On cross-examination by the defense, Holly said that she knows Mark Blanford, the third person arrested. She also testified that Michael sometimes drove the company trucks. And then that was it. The last person who testified was Holly Beard's sister. She testified to running a truck to help the couple move after Kelley Clayton's death. So I don't know what the point of that was. But
I was going to say, why? Yeah, why?
Sometimes we have pointless witnesses, and and it's not that they're pointless. They have something small to add. Sometimes it's as simple as Holly Beard said something, and they needed to back up
just
something she said.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
Good job. They just want to corroborate it. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. January 17th. So this is the next week. So we were ending on a Friday. We're to the start of a new week. The jury heard from the New York State police officer who had to secure the Clayton's residence the night of the murder. After that, Michael Blanford took the stand. And we can get into detail about what the New York State police officer saw, but I have told you multiple times, and I don't want to be super repetitive. Well, Michael Blanton ends up taking the stand. He is the one who was with Michael Beard the night of the murder, rides along with him. Blanford says, "I was involved in something I didn't want to be involved in." Blanford said on the night of the murder, he and Beard picked up beers before heading toward the Corning area. He said Beard pulled over, got out of the truck, and went elsewhere. When he came back, he said Beard was sweating and out of breath and had something that looked like a stick in his hand. As they drove away, Beard held this stick thing out the window and eventually tossed it. Blanford said he also tossed a bag out the window, he being Beard. It contained beer cans, gloves, and a black t-shirt. Blanford said he had never met or communicated with Thomas Clayton, and during his testimony, Clayton started bawling. So Blanford's testifying he doesn't know Thomas, and Thomas is crying the whole time he's testifying about all this. Why might Mark Blanford have been testifying at this point? Any thoughts?
Well, I would think that they're going to have to, aren't they trying to connect them all?
Well, I guess I meant a little bit. You're getting all detailed on me. I meant more simply than that. He was charged with a crime, right? And he's a co-conspirator.
Oh, gosh. Now they can use that against him during his trial, right?
They could if he hadn't accepted a plea.
Oh, he accepted a plea.
So just so you guys know, at this point, he's accepted a plea to the manslaughter. He is probably, in his plea offer, agreed to testify honestly against Mr. Clayton.
It's interesting to me that he said a stick thing. It was almost like he's trying to separate himself and his knowledge so far.
I can tell you that I saw a photograph of the mall hammer, or the mall base, right? And it's fiberglass. It's not, and it's kind of cut off. It's very bloody. Even when you find it, it does look like this weird stick.
Oh, really?
It does look like this weird, you wouldn't know that it went on some type of an implement.
Oh, okay. Huh.
So I'll see if we can find pictures of that as well.
Sure. I just thought that he was he was trying to do more degrees of separation of I really didn't know what I was looking at.
So cross-examination of Blanford then by the defense, he's asked about his history of burglary convictions and home invasions. The defense is trying to establish a motive for why Blanford may have been with Beard on the night of the murder. Mm-hmm. And on redirect then, when the prosecutor gets a chance to ask their questions, we always get to go last in those cases. Blanford was asked about his role on the night of the murder. He says, "I was the lookout." He said, he had been drinking and smoking weed that night. He had 10 to 12 tall boys.
Jesus.
Right? Y'all, those are
tall boys?
Those are 40s.
Whoa.
That's a tall boy.
He drank an entire case of beer
10 to 12 tall boys.
Shit.
He said he was nervous about what they were doing that night, and that was all he could say. And then the defense objected. Also on redirect, Blanford again asked about burglary charges. He said that he once stole beer from a gas station and a bong from someone's house, but he had never entered the Clayton home.
Oh, Lord.
Blanford said he was relieved to be out of the truck and away from Michael Beard after the murder. Kevin Morris.
And there's not any evidence that he was in the house at all.
None.
Right. Okay.
There's none. I honestly believe this guy, he was the lookout. Mm-hmm. He was paid probably a small amount by Beard that night, who didn't have much to give anyway. And he may have been drunk and high.
And a bunch of tall boys. Okay.
Yeah. And a bunch of tall boys.
I've got some weed, tall boys, and here's $1,000.
I mean, some people might think that's the start to a hell of a night, but it wasn't a hell of a night this night.
I'm thinking not.
And he got himself into some shit.
Yeah.
And that's what he said at the beginning, remember? I got myself into a situation I didn't want to get into.
Yeah.
So there's a Kevin Morris then that testifies. He had worked with Thomas Clayton at Serve Pro. He said he and Clayton had often gambled together. He knew Clayton kept cash in the house and had a safe in the basement. He testified that Clayton often bragged about his money, saying Clayton would sometimes bring as much as $10,000 to tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
Poker games.
Sitting himself at the high roller table.
You got it. Morris said the poker game that Clayton attended on the night of Kelley's death was held every week. Everyone knew it met on Monday nights. And then he went on to describe what he thought the relationship between Kelley and Thomas was. He described both Thomas and Kelley as, quote unquote, very stubborn people in regards to their relationship. Mm-hmm. He described Thomas as flirty, testifying he would often flirt with other women when Kelley wasn't around. Mm-hmm. And jurors also heard from Larry Johnson. He worked with him as well. And he described a drive that he had taken with Michael Beard a week before Kelley Clayton's death. Beard asked Johnson to pull on a side road, and there was a white truck on the road that had apparently been left there for Beard.
Really?
I wonder who left it.
Yeah, no kidding.
They got in the truck. They drive to the Clayton home. Johnson said Beard then gets on a bike that was in the bed of the truck and rode away for half an hour. And then when he returned, they drove to where the pickup truck was. So on cross-examination, he says he only told police about this drive a couple weeks ago, and then he had to get it off his chest. Because I think he's nervous that he's involved. He knows what happens when he drove him there to that truck to meet up, and he ends up on a bicycle, he being Beard.
Right.
Right? Okay. January 19th is continuing. This Luke Tatro, who I'd mentioned to you before, who was one of the business partners. So he gets called to testify, and it was his maroon truck is the one that Michael Beard allegedly drove to the Clayton's home the night of the murder. He testifies that he and Clayton switched trucks that day. The day before Kelley's death. He says Thomas Clayton suggested they switch trucks so that he could take a four-wheeler he loaned to Tatro home. Then on the day of Kelley's death, Tatro was asked to search Clayton's truck. And this is for a passport, where he finds it on the back seat. Finds some other stuff too. Okay. Tatro also identified the murder weapon as a maul handle that he and a friend had accidentally broken while splitting wood.
Okay.
This is why it looks like a stick.
Yes.
He knows this weapon.
Yeah.
He also stated that he never would have allowed Michael Beard to drive his truck. Okay. So he's making this arrangement with Thomas Clayton.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very important information.
Greg Miller takes the stand. Greg is the one who we heard from in the last trial as well, who is the neighbor that they play poker at. And he says he's been hosting games on Monday nights for several years. Clayton's been there for at least Thomas Clayton's been there at least the last 4 years. Monday games were just known, and that he'd notify players at least a week in advance if it was going to be canceled. But basically, you show up every Monday night and there's poker at the Millers. So Miller said that games were held regularly, but the defense had suggested that the game came up out of the blue.
Oh.
So Miller said Clayton had wanted to play longer. He said he'd play till 5 a.m. if people wanted to. Miller also testified that there's good cell coverage in his house. And this is because, Clayton had asked to borrow the phone that night because he said his wasn't working.
Right.
So there was a lot of testimony about phone calls. 2 different witnesses testified that Thomas had borrowed their phones to place calls the day before Kelley died. Both calls were placed to Beard and then later deleted from both of those people's phones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he doesn't want phone calls on his phone. Mm-hmm.
And I think there was quite a bit, but now he's starting to use other people's. Okay, so then on January 20th, jurors get to see surveillance video from the ServPro parking lot. This is the night of Kelley's death. The video shows the red truck that Michael Beard allegedly drove to Clayton's home from ServPro around 6:10 p.m. that night. A green truck that Thomas Clayton, was allegedly driving that night was seen leaving about 30 seconds later. The red truck pulls back into the ServPro parking lot at 12:55 a.m., minutes after Kelley was murdered. Mm-hmm. The headlights were turned off on the truck when it pulled in. Okay? Mm-hmm. People who aren't being shady don't turn their headlights off in the dark when you're pulling in.
Nope. Sure don't.
Luke Tatro's mom testified as well. She testified that she picked up her son's truck the next day after the murder, and she was pissed because there was no gas in it and there was a bag of chips and dip on the passenger seat, and she was not happy about the state of this car.
Oh, because the people that were driving it had been high. The lookout guy got the munchies.
Yep. She also testified when she was under cross-examination by the defense that she didn't notice any damage or blood in the truck.
Sure. She also wasn't looking for it.
No.
I mean, come on.
No. So the New York State police investigator who had testified that he had interviewed, this is the guy that interviewed Michael Beard the afternoon after Kelley died. He obtained Michael Beard's phone, but he couldn't tell jurors what he observed on the phone because the defense objected. Okay. So it hadn't had a foundation established. It wasn't going to come in through him. Mm-hmm. A woman ended up testifying. Her name is protected, to having an extramarital affair with Thomas Clayton.
Mm-hmm. That does not shock any of us.
Had told her he wanted a divorce, but he couldn't because Kelley would, quote unquote, take everything. And the defense suggested in their cross that this was a joke.
Oh my gosh. It's so funny. That's a funny joke. Yeah. You're so good at the jokes.
Yeah. Marissa Clarkson, who also is a ServPro employee, testified that day. She testified that she had learned that Michael Beard had been stealing when he worked for ServPro. And so this is because we know he was fired, right?
Right. I was going to ask if that ever came out of why he was fired.
According to her, and that's why it was testified to, it was because he had been stealing. Mm-hmm. That same coworker had said that she had overheard him being Thomas Clayton, talking at work about his struggle to get bloodstains out of the carpet, and that he seemed more upset about the stains than his wife's death. So this was after,
dear God,
because he did post bond. Remember?
Right? Yes. Yep. Can we also just point out right now that this dude, Thomas, has been manipulating Michael since spring. Yeah. Okay. More than likely, Michael probably didn't even steal anything, but he needed a reason to fire him so that he could set up his framing of Michael, like his alibi of the whole reason this guy broke in and murdered my wife. I had nothing to do with it because he's a disgruntled employee.
All possible. Absolutely.
I think he had this not to give him any credit or anything, but I think that he had this thought out.
Yeah.
In this regard.
I believe, if you believe anything about Michael Beard, it's that I think he was easily manipulated and led into this plan. But the fact of the matter is, he completed it.
He did.
He's
the type of dude that would do it, and he did it. So, yep.
So one of the ladies testifying, who happened to be a friend of Kelley's who testified that day, said that Thomas Clayton had actually once complained about him and Kelley's sexual relationship. So. Right. But under cross said that he had also spoiled her and that they were, quote unquote, proud of each other. On January 23rd, this is a tough day for the family. They ended up, a lot of them, leaving in tears. The investigators on the stand, they're talking about blood spatter, but this is the day that more than 100 photos of the crime scene were shown to the jurors, including close-up shots of Kelley's body.
Yeah.
Yep. And then there was also a canine handler who testified that his dog is the one that found the murder weapon 4 days after Kelley was killed. So I think if we recall correctly, Beard took them to where the murder weapon was, like location wise, but he had tossed it.
Right.
So it was
didn't really actually know.
It was a trusty
pinpoint.
It was a trusty canine. State police investigator Kevin Sucher, or maybe it's Sucker, Sucher, Sucher. Sucker. Okay. Took the stand for, it would suck if his last name was Sucker.
It really was.
There's a sucker born every day.
Yes.
Right? But we like you, Kevin. He took the stand for 7 hours.
Oh my gosh, Kevin.
He analyzed blood spatter patterns around the Claytons' home. And then also jurors were shown photos of the crime scene, not just of her body. And again, these were super graphic, and they went through in a photographic, almost like a timeline of her death. And defense attorneys also spent time cross-examining Sucher, and they wanted to know why investigators didn't follow any normal protocol in regards to burglaries, and why Thomas Clayton wasn't guided through his home to check to see if anything was missing. I'm sure that there was a hope that could cause some issue with the jury, but I think when they were investigating a murder, they happened to go through that protocol instead of the burglary.
I was going to say the same thing. I think the murder was probably their number one priority over the, hey, do you have any trinkets missing?
Right. Exactly.
But I get what they're trying to pull at of saying that, you didn't even investigate it as a break-in from the beginning. Especially with the daughter saying it was a burglary.
Evidence of a break-in. There was no evidence of a burglary.
That's the other thing. It's not like anything was broken into.
Yep. At this point, on January 24th, there's a lot of testimony at this point about searches that had occurred and some surveillance video from some businesses in Elmira. The defense is really, in their cross-examination, it's coming through that they're trying to push a theory, and it's going to come out. You're going to figure out what the theory is of the defense. And the theory is that police zeroed in on Thomas as a suspect on day one and didn't look for other suspects.
Yes, right.
Even though they found the second suspect on day 2. Just pointing that out.
Right, except there was.
So investigators rushed to judgment and targeted from the start. So this red pickup truck that investigators allege Thomas Clayton let Michael Beard drive on the day that Kelley Clayton was killed, that was testified to as well.
Do we find it interesting that he would let a former employee who was let go for stealing take one of the company's trucks?
Shouldn't we? I mean, they left it up to the jury to make the determination about that relationship.
As a jury member,
he also rented from him. Was currently renting from him. Well, the state police investigator, Michael Lestraco, who actually did the DNA analysis, processed the truck. He did not find any blood or DNA evidence, and so he could not make a determination as to whether or not Beard had actually used it. Okay. So just so we know, there is some loose end there. And Lestraco also said the tire impressions made at the crime scene did not match that red truck. Okay. Continuing on that day, Michael Lestraco testified that...
But it rained, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He testified to finding a key in the truck's glove box that was later taken into evidence. He also said he dusted the inside and outside of the truck for fingerprints, but found none. The medical examiner...
None at all?
No.
Like it had been swept? Because shouldn't it have some fingerprints?
None of significance.
Okay.
He found none of significance. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because I didn't clarify that. He found none of significance, and then I believe outside, as we had indicated, the weather had taken care of the rest from there.
Yes. Yeah.
The medical examiner did continue that it was blunt force trauma to the head. This is a trigger alert. She described the damage to Kelley's face. Her eyes, nose, and mouth were distorted, and her face was sunken in. Her face was smashed in. Insurance agent Paul Gingrich ended up testifying as well. This is the friend / insurance agent that actually increased the life insurance policy. On that day, I believe when January 25th was a Wednesday, the defense called for a mistrial in the Thomas Clayton murder. So you can do this. Defense attorneys do this.
Right.
Your Honor, I need you to excuse the jury. I have an objection, and they say there's grounds for a mistrial. Okay. It was described as heated. There had been information brought up that had been kept from the jury, and now it's being suddenly brought up. So New York State Police investigator Kenneth Ruland was on the stand. He was testifying about keys that were recovered. He and other investigators checked to see if the keys would unlock the Claytons' garage door. During cross, the defense criticized Ruland for not checking other doors in the house. In his redirect then, prosecutor Whedon Wetmore said police checked the garage door because Michael Beard had already confessed and they knew where and what to check. That's when the defense objected. So the jury gets excused during this objection and the defense calls for a for a mistrial. It ended up being denied. He was, this is where he's talking about the confession. Okay. So it wasn't about the keys, you guys.
No, it's that they brought in the information of the confession.
Because the police officer said, well, I didn't need to check all of them because Michael Beard already confessed to the killing. Objection. It's grounds for a mistrial. Well, in the prior trial, it was already found to be appropriate to bring up for the jury, and he was convicted of this crime.
Right.
So the defense fails in their motion. The judge denies that. Then so the jurors get to hear. Then they hear from the insurance agent who testifies about how Thomas would receive 100% of Kelley's $1 million policy. Mm-hmm. However, he did indicate that Thomas had made no attempts to claim insurance money after Kelley's death, but that Thomas's dad called to inquire about it.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is just evidence.
Some
things don't get explained any more than that. Mm-hmm. You guys take it for what it's worth.
That's what sucks about being a juror member.
Who is out on bond. Mm-hmm. Okay. He doesn't try to collect the wife's insurance money, and they wouldn't have given it to him anyway.
No.
Any insurance adjuster's like, you're on trial. Yep. But his dad, Kelley's father-in-law, did call to inquire about that. January 2016, I make up numbers now. Numbers are hard. On the 26th of January, which is day 13 of the Clayton murder trial, Mike Strobel took the stand. He had worked for the Jackals, and Brian Lang, the owner of ServPro, had also took the stand, the dude who he worked with.
Yeah.
So Mike Strobel testified that he'd known Clayton for years, and in the days leading up to Kelley's death, Clayton had asked about security cameras at the Lindenwald house in Elmira. Clayton told him he was asking because there had been an incident with one of his vehicles. Mm-hmm. So this part to me is like, so he's worried that he's caught on a security camera someplace else.
Yeah.
That's this Lindenwald house. Well, Brian Lang testifies about the GPS system that's on all of the ServPro vehicles. He's the coworker. And they asked him to look at Clayton's records. GPS records show Clayton was driving green ServPro truck on the night of September 28th, early morning of September 29th when Kelley was killed. Lang also testified that he had fired Beard from ServPro a couple weeks prior in that September, and it was his decision to fire Beard, not Clayton's.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Lang testified that he's the one who told Beard he was fired, not Clayton, and that he was let go for drinking, drugs, and stealing.
Okay.
The prosecution argued that Beard had nothing against Clayton, and he was not seeking revenge. Lang also said he found the keys to the red truck that Beard allegedly drove to the Clayton home in a lockbox outside ServPro. He said it was unlocked and anyone had access. He also testified that Clayton would talk to him about the other women he was having affairs with. Mm-hmm. So the guy like that has got to brag about his conquest to someone.
Of course.
Yep.
He needs that attention and outside validation.
He also said that Clayton offered to pay $100,000 in cash to buy the building. So he and Clayton were going to purchase a new building together for ServPro. And that's the $100,000 cash. You know where I'm going with this, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. He took the stand and he said that the bag of money that was found was for a $100,000 purchase. They were looking to buy a new building.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Uh-huh. After Kelley died, Lang said Clayton called him to go get the money in the truck. Uh-huh. Lang testified that he found the money, but that's also when he found the passport as well. And he turned the money over to Thomas Clayton's father.
Really?
The same father that called to ask about the
was just going to say, that's... Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. He also talked about Michael Beard more about him, specifically stating that he was like drinking on the job and stuff for the reason for the firing.
Why he was fired?
He testified that Clayton would bring his kids to ServPro, and he was a very loving father. He was emotional when he was talking about it to the jury, and said that Thomas Clayton was someone who loved his wife and that his affairs were just confusing.
Okay.
Right? So he knows that his buddy's bragging to him about sleeping with other women, but still indicates he loves his wife. So it was just confusing as to why he was having affairs.
Interesting, though, that he's also testifying. He's taking away his entire defense, though, when he's testifying that he's the one that fired Michael
Well, Lane's
Beard.
not in trouble.
No, I know, but he's tested like, I'm the one that fired him. So then there goes the whole disgruntled employee thing. Mm-hmm. He should have been mad at Lang.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Not at Clayton.
Oh yeah, absolutely. What a good point. And I think what they're trying to show with this is that Michael and Thomas, there was never any animosity.
Right.
There, you got it. You hit it. They're friends.
Yeah.
And he needed some help, and he would shoot Michael some money here and there because he was having a hard time making ends meet, probably because of the drugs.
I would imagine.
Which came up there. Well, continuing along the line of Lang giving his opinion of Kelley and Thomas Clayton's relationship, he said, I never witnessed them fight. I never witnessed Tom get aggressive with Kelley. And Kelley was independent, strong, tough, and didn't take BS from anybody. So all things that we kind of know about Kelley. Mm-hmm. But
considering we know that she was hit in the head and then ran after the fucker, like
while trying still to save her child, children? Telling her children to run.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is a woman that fought for her life up until someone took it from her.
And her children's lives.
Yes. Mm-hmm. He said that Clayton would talk about money he kept in his home, specifically in a safe in the basement. Clayton would keep a substantial amount of cash on him at all times, estimating hundreds of dollars.
Hundreds and tens of dollars.
Tens of Okay, we know at some point there was 22 grand. Right, so I know it's in there, but that just caught me as funny. An owner of a roofing company also said that Clayton had asked him about a possible job for Beard a week before Kelley's death. So he's still trying to help Beard.
Yes.
There were several photos that were taken inside the Clayton home where they identified a garage. It was a garage showing gas cans, and there was earlier testimony claiming that those gas cans weren't usually there. Okay. So
remember
a garage
house thing
that didn't usually have gas cans, and someone, we are at this point, you guys, they're pointing to Thomas Clayton in his own home. He put those gas cans in there.
Right.
This is inevitably to make it easier for Beard then to light the place up.
Right.
If he wouldn't
he
wouldn't panicked and taken off with the nail polish remover and the flame.
Right. And the flame.
Not usually.
Took the flame with him.
Not usually a good source of for arson.
I wouldn't think.
I mean, I have accidentally lit a number of things on fire. Like when you're starting a bonfire and you're, trying to get the paper to go, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, that's fantastic. My tennis shoelace is on fire.
Right.
Accelerant is accelerant.
For sure. My leggings. I've burned a couple pairs of leggings.
Right. It happens. At this point on January 30th, we're at the start of week 4. Week 4 of this trial.
These jurors and her family. Oh, her family.
Absolutely. So jurors are shown photos again of the Clayton's garage. So when they brought in that photograph they were identified by him. Now the jurors are actually seeing the photographs. They're seeing the gas cans that are set up in the garage. This is all testimony from an investigator, Daniel Armstrong. And he also testified, and this is important, that when he searched the premises, there was no sign of forced entry. So it wasn't just that there was anything visible. These are the guys that go through and they look at windows and doors and they look for tool marks, burglar tool marks. And there is nothing to indicate there was any forced entry at any time. The defense asked him about a nail in the wall of the garage and what may have been hanging from it, and he wasn't sure. They pointed out that there was a gas-powered leaf blower and weed eater in the garage. Well, the defense is going to point this out because you need to have gas to power that.
Right.
And they also pointed out there's a propane furnace in the detached garage that was being repaired. So the gas cans may have been moved to the attached garage of the Clayton home because they are flammable. They also asked about debris and some dirt found on stairs to a basement, and Armstrong admitted that it wasn't taken into evidence. That dirt.
Yeah.
Again, homicide investigation, no signs of forced entry. So if there's dirt on the floors of the house, Right. They came from somebody who was allowed in the house.
Remember when he was asking Lang about the camera footage at a certain building?
Yes.
Do you think that maybe he was worried about being caught with all those gas cans in a truck, possibly?
I think that maybe, or the gas cans had been there and he simply transferred them to the attached part.
Yeah, okay.
This is a rural place, and these guys had toys. They had 4-wheelers and toys and played with stuff like that, right? So I think it was just a matter of moving them.
I just wondered if he, I think
but they would have had to be filled, and so you're right.
That's what
thrown in there so that they could go be filled with gas and brought to be placed full back in there. Totally possible. The poker game then was focused on quite a bit as well at this point in time. Abby Tipton, this is this good friend of Kelley's. She says a few months after Kelley's death and stuff, you guys, information that comes up after can still be evidence in terms of conversations that happen or just things that you find weird. She got a call from Thomas. Like, he just calls one of Kelley's friends and says, I love Kelley. I would never kill her. Like, called to tell her that.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Cool. That proves nothing.
Right. So there was a canine handler who testified that day as well. I almost said the canine testified, which would be a lot remarkable cooler if they did, right? That he had tracked, the dog had tracked a scent near the Clayton property, but unfortunately he lost it after 5 minutes. So we know that there was a truck at some point that had pulled up and a bicycle potentially as well that are involved. Yeah. So either of those can stop a smell, and then it rained. 3 of the players from the poker game took the stand as well, and as corroborated in previous testimony, everyone talked about how Thomas Clayton borrowed a phone to call Michael Beard just hours beforehand, and then on January 31st, this is when a legal investigation specialist with Google testified.
The Googs.
We love the Googs.
Okay.
She had gathered GPS and search records from Michael Beard. And then we also have the Verizon wireless custodian who testifies as well. And he is going to testify, or did testify, about the collected call and text details for Thomas and Kelley.
Thomas and Kelley.
Okay. So he testified that on September 26th, 3 days before the murder, Clayton and Beard had 3 phone conversations.
Okay.
On September 28th, the night of Kelley's death, Beard called Clayton at 5:55 p.m., and that call lasted 77 seconds. The AT&T rep collected the phone records for Beard, and he testified 68 phone calls had been made between Clayton and Beard in the month of September of 2015.
That's a lot of chatting.
It is a lot of chatting. During the murder trial as well.
Phone calls, not just text messages. Those are phone calls, people. I don't talk to anybody 68 times in a month.
Phone calls. Wow. I don't either. I couldn't pick one single person that I talked to 68. Yep. If there are 68 phone calls on my phone, it's because my school called twice a day that month.
Right.
To let me know school was canceled or somebody had an absence.
Yeah. I bet the only I get incoming telemarketer calls maybe 68 times a month, but God. I haven't talked to anybody.
And those don't all be from the same. Right. And it would show
that's a profound amount, you guys.
It would show that you hung up immediately too, not that you carried on a conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
So he said Clayton told, so I'm sorry, about a month and a half after Kelley's death, this guy had lunch, this Brian Donovan. He's a friend of both Thomas and Kelley's, and he had lunch with Thomas, and he asked him about a phone call made to Michael Beard the night of Kelley's death. He said Clayton told him he spoke with Beard many times a day, and he had work for him to do, adding that his phone was dead, and that's why he borrowed a phone to call Beard the night of Kelley's death. Mm-hmm. Okay, so he tells his friend this my phone died.
My phone is dead. My phone is dead.
He also asked Thomas, his friend, about the bag of money and passport found in his car. And Clayton told his friend, I always have money available on me for casino trips.
With my passport, just in case I need to.
$100,000 for a casino trip.
Yeah.
Where is he going, Monte Carlo?
I don't know. I can't imagine. I don't know what that amount of money looks like, Megan. I don't know.
February 1st, day 17 of the trial, New York State Police investigator Brian Kazemko reads the statement Clayton made to the police, and it was a recap of what he'd done the night before. This is the part where you were talking about how you would cover up your wife or your husband's parts if you walked in on them. Mm-hmm. He wrote, when he got home that night, he saw Kelley lying on the floor. Quote, unquote, I didn't touch her. Her face looked so horrific. Clayton said one of his children yelled, Mommy is dead, And the other yelled there was a robber.
But your 2-year-old can talk?
I guess.
What?
He could. I know 2-year-olds.
No, I know, but is he?
I know.
He's certainly not the one saying it was a robber. But with the robber.
Right.
Come on.
So
he's saying mommy is dead?
Well, one of them yells mommy's dead and the other yells there was a robber.
I don't know about this.
Yep. I frankly, I think it was all Charlie.
Yes. Yeah.
You can't interview, you guys, forensically interview a 2-year-old.
No.
And even if I'm off on the ages, if instead of 5 and 2, they're like 7 and 4, 4 is still such tender years that they're going to go off of her statements. He says in his statement, I just wanted to get my kids out of the house. I did not hurt or kill Kelley. During questioning, Kazumko, who's testifying about the statement he read, was asked, he asked Clayton if he had any enemies or disgruntled employees, and he couldn't think of anyone. Michael Beard's name did not come up once during Clayton's initial questioning.
Really?
Yep. So all of a sudden, this disgruntled employee, that whole thing he's trying, it never came up during his initial questioning.
Okay. Well, then I take back what I was hypothesizing earlier when I said, I think he had started this a long time before. No.
Well, I think he was starting the setup a long time before, but it didn't occur to him to say that night when they said, could this be anybody? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you have said, oh, well,
because
this employee.
He knows he hired him to do it, and so he's trying not to implicate that?
As I told you, there was somebody who testified about communication between Kelley and Thomas as well. Mm-hmm. Clayton showed investigators his last text message exchange with Kelley, and they were just talking about getting the kids to bed.
I was going to say, he's just confirming where she's at in the house.
Yep. And he was very emotional in court as the investigator was reading through the statements that he made. He being Clayton, told investigators there was money in a safe under the bed and another safe in the basement. On cross, they asked that investigator why they didn't consider this important enough to include in his statement. The police also, because there had been a talk of the one safe, but not of the bottom of the stairs.
In the basement?
Right. They asked why the interview with Clayton wasn't recorded. And he said the police station that we went to didn't have the capacity. Right. They just didn't. I've explained to you. And again, I'm not saying that that's right, you guys, but that's how it was.
I mean, that was the reality. Yeah. They're not going to pull one out of their ass.
I like this part too. The defense asked Clayton why Clayton was handcuffed that morning. And when the investigator said he wasn't, Thomas Clayton rolled his eyes, like for the jury to see. So the investigator saying he wasn't handcuffed. And I think they're trying to show that he is somehow being, not having been appropriately Mirandized, not having had his rights
He was
protected.
honed in on the police, and they zeroed in on him and wouldn't consider anybody else.
This is it.
Yep, and he probably wasn't handcuffed, and he purposely set all that questioning up so that he can try to plant a seed of doubt in the jury.
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions then that get asked regarding the truck swap and why Clayton was driving the Servpro truck that night instead of Luke's red truck. Mm-hmm. So the defense said Clayton wanted to return the red truck to Servpro so Luke Tatro would have it in the morning. Those two women who testified also that they had extramarital affairs with Thomas Clayton around the time of his wife's death. Mm-hmm. One of the women alleged Clayton told her that he wished someone would come and take her away.
Imagine that. Do you think that they're out there in the sequestrian spot and they're like, oh, you slept with Thomas too? You slept with... Imagine that when he was like, oh, baby, you're the only one for me.
Well, the part that drew gasps from the courtroom was when a second mistress testified that their affair started before Kelley died and continued after.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm judging her now, too.
A family member also took the stand, and he said months before Kelley died, Thomas had said at a family gathering that it would be the last time they were all together.
What?
Yes. The family member is a she.
Okay.
Said Clayton told her he was sleeping with multiple other women, that he didn't love Kelley and he didn't want to be with her.
Oh my God. Is this one of Kelley's relatives or one of his own?
I believe it's
one of his own. Yeah. Oh, okay.
So the state police investigator continued later that day too. He testified about the evidence that they found around Elmira, including the keys to the Clayton home, clothing in the swamp, and a bicycle with Michael Beard's fingerprints.
Yeah, remember that bicycle that
That's right.
drove away from the back of that truck?
Yeah, so Clayton's defense had previously argued that Beard broke into the Clayton home and killed Kelley during robbery, and then he pointed to a safe in the home's basement as evidence and claims that there was a safe stolen from under the bed and that safe has never been recovered. Basically, the police didn't do their investigation. Thomas Clayton was never allowed to walk through here. He would have told you that there was another safe missing from his bed, and so now it's not recovered.
Yep. How do you know that there wasn't a safe missing? Because you didn't investigate that, when in reality there's probably not a safe missing.
Right.
Yeah.
He examined, the police officer did, the investigator, the safe in the basement, and after opening it, he found 3 passports, empty money wrappers, and photos. He did not find any money in the safe.
Oh, really?
That money was gone out of the safe, and I bet it was $100,000.
It was the $100,000? 3 passports of whom's? Kelley's and the kids? Probably.
Well, where was his passport?
Right, in the truck.
Yeah. So there were 3 passports, just 3 passports in there. Okay. Mm-hmm. February 2nd, Jason Feifeld, another investigator, he was on cross-examination, and they asked him if any trace evidence like fingerprints were taken from inside the safe in the Clayton basement. He said there were no signs of forced entry in the safe, so we didn't take anything in for examination.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
They're still trying to show that there was a robbery, and that
and they neglected
Michael
to investigate
Beard
that angle.
Stole this, right? Although no money was ever found on Michael Beard.
Right.
It was in the
Also,
so Michael Beard stole Thomas Clayton's passport and money and put it in his truck.
Right. Right.
Where's this money?
To do what with it? Yes,
right.
Exactly.
Thomas has already indicated at one point in time in one of his confession that he carries that money around for a quick casino trip, right?
Just in case. Also, Michael confessed and never mentioned any money besides the $10,000 he was paid. You're right.
He was never even paid.
Right. Well, no, he got caught too fast for the exchange to happen.
Well, and he didn't. It was
probably taken out of that. It was supposed to be taken out of that $100,000 that he had in his truck.
Maybe if he intended to pay him at all.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
So as we know, he testified, no signs of forced entry. Why would I? He also said, no one told me about an alleged lockbox under the couple's bed in the master bedroom, and no one's ever found one.
Right. And also, like,
can't look for something I don't know about.
For sure. Because the homeowner did not tell me about it. If he was trying to set up that this was a burglary gone wrong, why wouldn't he have mentioned that?
Right.
During his first interview.
Now, he also testified that tire impressions taken from the crime scene were never sent out for forensic analysis. And I don't like that, but it happens. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. And Allison Regan also testified. She was an investigator with the New York State Police Computer Crimes Unit who extracted data from both Thomas Kelley and Michael Beard's cell phones. The defense actually tried to discredit her experience and exclude her report and testimony. She had first examined Beard's phone and is the one who initially noticed a heavy amount of deleted activity and interesting powering events. Remember, she was saying it was powering on and off. This is the gal from Beard's trial. Mm-hmm. She testified Michael Beard's phone was powered off at the time of the murder. Then texts between Thomas Clayton and his wife were focused on briefly as well. The defense spent hours cross-examining that investigator who had extracted the information, focusing on texts between the couple in the months leading up to the murder that suggested that it was an affectionate relationship. Okay. And I think it probably on text was.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So earlier, and this is because earlier the prosecution had examined Beard's text about a week before Kelley's murder. So they're trying to throw a wrench in it, saying this is a perfectly loving, normal text message exchange between a husband and a wife.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all because I don't think I text. If you're in a fight with your spouse, truly, you know what I mean? Like,
now, the defense did show the jury photos of the text exchanges between Kelley and Thomas, including one that had happened, a text exchange while Tom was away for work a week before her murder. Again, assuming these are probably positive for him, like it was a loving thing.
Right. But also, if he's setting this up, he's not starting fights with her. Like, he is going to look like a doting husband.
What they were wanting to show was that it was common for Michael Beard to delete data from his phone, even prior to September.
Okay. Well, yeah, if he's an adulterer, of course he's going to be deleting things.
Michael Beard's web history showed that he had spent a lot of time searching for jobs in September of 2015. Sure. And in one exchange, Michael Beard actually asked Clayton for advice on how to get money he was owed from him. So the defense asked Regan if she examined Mark Blanford's or some other friends' cell phones, and she testified that she did not. So again, I mean, I don't know why maybe she wouldn't have looked at Mark Blanford's, but I can tell you from what I heard evidence-wise, there wasn't any type of a phone exchange with Michael Blanford. Michael Beard went Mark. I'm gonna confuse
right? Her. I know there's a lot.
Michael Beard went to Mark Blanford personally and said, "Hey, I need y'all along for a job."
Right.
My lookout. So
yeah.
Mark Blanford. There's no indication there was any planning period, so that's why.
Right.
But it is an attempt to discredit, like she didn't do her job by looking at all of the phones, all of the information. So the computer crimes unit witness Deborah Jasinski examined Thomas Clayton's cell phone. It had come out that Clayton had borrowed the phone to call Beard the night that his wife was killed because he said his own was dead. But data shows activity on Clayton's phone during that time. So he lied. He lied.
Yep, there you go.
Other texts involved a truck Clayton had borrowed that Beard allegedly used the night of the murder, and prosecutors tried to show that Clayton planned ahead to have a vehicle for Beard to use.
Right.
Obviously.
Yep.
Day 20, which is February 7th, Deborah Jasinski is still testifying. She's being cross-examined. So she's saying there was no user activity on Thomas Clayton's cell phone after 10:16 p.m. on the night of the murder until a 911 call after midnight.
Okay.
The defense asked if background activity indicated there was enough power to make a phone call. They said Clayton's phone was dying, and so he had to borrow the phone to call Michael Beard on the night of the murder.
Yep.
The defense asked about Apple recall issues regarding batteries draining rapidly in 2015.
God. Yeah. The dark ages.
Well,
I remember
cell
that.
was manufactured around them, and yes, back in the dark ages, 2015 with cell battery issues. They argued that Clayton charged his phone on the way home. So saying his phone was dead at the poker game, he just charged it on the way home. Well, the drive home was only 13 minutes. So this expert, Jasinski, she estimates, okay, if Clayton's cell phone was at 1% when he left the poker game, he'd have 13% by the time he got home.
Okay.
Cell data showed that he continued to use his cell phone after midnight until 6 a.m. with calls and texts.
Right.
When she examined his cell phone 2 days later, she estimated it was at 20% battery.
Okay.
So it wasn't dead.
He didn't need to borrow a friend's phone to make that phone call.
She also testified there were 101 entries, both texts and calls, on his cell phone on September 26, and that only one was deleted. The deleted text was to Luke Tatro regarding returning four-wheelers, which was the reason the two swapped trucks. Right. So weirdly, he goes back and deletes that one text.
Interesting.
Well, that's what had to do with the truck swapping.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
what links you.
Yeah.
The prosecutor also showed deleted text on other days leading up to the murder that included text to his alleged mistress and to Beard. Because those were things he's trying to hide. The 911 call center operator testified, and the jury heard the chilling tape of the call that Clayton made to 911 the night of the murder. And then on cross-examination, the defense played other 911 center tapes from the night of the murder as well. I'm assuming there were multiple calls coming in. He did testify that Clayton said, help me, my wife is dead. The operator asked Clayton how he knows she's dead. He responded, you'll see when you get here.
Okay.
We don't, you just see my face.
Yeah.
We don't get judgy of how people react on 911 tapes because we have had people react just awful and have actually not been guilty of anything. Right. He became
You'll see when you
Thomas Clayton. Yeah, see when you get here. Thomas was very emotional in court when the tape was being played back. They said that in terms of the other 911 tapes, because these are law enforcement tapes and stuff as well. They heard things like law enforcement saying they're comfortable, they have a good suspect, this is the domestic, those things.
Right.
This is why the defense is moving forward than the argument that Thomas Clayton was targeted from the very start by police. A forensic scientist also took the stand, and he examined yellow fragments taken from Kelley's body, just so you know, and this is not anything that's even in question, those are fragments from the yellow mall handle that had been injured and caused her ultimate demise.
Okay.
The February 8th. Remember how we talked about how we seat extra jurors?
Yes.
An interesting thing happens here. There was an absent juror that morning, so they couldn't begin. Then the judge has to make a determination. Do we replace her? And there are 3 alternates, and they're all here today. So they do end up moving an alternate juror in and continue with the testimony. So one person who has been sitting through all this time because they were absent, I'm assuming they were sick or something, couldn't come. And so now they're done and the alternate juror is in. Cy Ray is the name of a man who works for an analytical software company named Zetx. Z-E-T-X.
Ooh,
how do you say Zetx?
Yeah, Zetx. That's hard. A T and an X next to each
I don't know. I don't like it in my mouth.
Me neither. It doesn't feel good.
Feels funny. So he's the owner of this company, and he looked at about 60,000 records in the case, including things like GPS and cell phone data. God. And jurors were able to see where Clayton and Beard were in the days leading up to the murder with all of this GPS location.
Perfect.
It showed Clayton and Beard were together twice in one day, about a week before the murder.
Okay.
Records show Beard drove to the Clayton home that night, turned his phone off, and later texted Clayton, "When you can, call me."
Okay.
So at this point, the prosecution's letting the jury draw its own conclusions.
Yeah.
And these are some notes that comment specifically that was made by the little gal who did this. Like she's noting what she's seen from the jury.
Right.
February 9th, that's Ray, still the data guy. He's summarizing testimony regarding Clayton and Beard's movements on days leading up to the murder. So he talked about Clayton's cell phone on the day and night of the murder and the level of reception on his phone. And then he testifies that records show a lot of activity on Clayton's phone from 10:37 p.m. to 11:05 p.m. while he was at the poker game and on the night of the murder.
Really?
Yep. So,
but his phone was dead.
Oh, it wasn't though.
Right.
And we know it wasn't now.
Yep.
So February 10th started kind of heated for Cy Ray because he's back on the stand again. 3 days he's on the stand.
Wow.
So the defense began to attempt.
Sorry,
I dropped a dick.
No, I shot out the queen of the peen.
It was the queen, the
right
skull.
Out of the sack. I'm sorry.
The defense attempted to, not she, the queen of the peen didn't do anything wrong. The defense attempted to discredit all of Cy Ray's qualifications.
All 3 days?
They asked him about his degrees, his certifications, read back testimony given in prior court cases, accused him of being biased. Because they said in one email he wrote, well, if you want to throw the defense a bone, I mean.
Okay.
Wait, so he offered to help you?
He was trying to help you. Right. Just, oh my gosh.
You gotta pick at people where you can.
No, I know. Remember that one trial that we had and they thought they were going to discredit me by saying that I didn't have any kids?
Yeah, because you looked like you were 12 and she's like, well, do you have children? Charnell's like, 3.
Yeah.
And the girl looked at her and the attorney looked at her and she was like, oh. Her face fell. It was so funny. Sad.
But yeah, so I'm familiar. I'm familiar with how they will try to pull at everything to discredit you.
They asked him if he altered any data from AT&T, Verizon, or Google, and he said, I did not. And I love that Tina puts in here, because, she's giving live-to-live updates. She goes, well, Ray's still under cross-examined, lots of quibbing, but no real substance in testimony so far today.
In her journaling.
She's just, this is on her blog. And this is what's being blogged.
Yeah.
So on February 14th, happy Valentine's Day, Thomas Clayton's trial continues with Brian Logsdon from the Steuben County Sheriff's Office. He's the one that recovers the mountain bike. So the silver mountain bike from Beard's apartments that he's found, he actually testifies he rode the mountain bike himself from Beard's apartment to ServPro. Okay, he's testing this out. It took 10 minutes and 22 seconds.
Okay.
He also rode the bike from ServPro back to Beard's, took a different route through a trail, and that took him 11 minutes and 40 seconds.
Okay.
He did the bike tests in February of 2017. Of course, the defense pointed out, well, times might have been different in September.
Okay.
They might have been faster.
Time runs different. From September.
Well, there's
to
weather
February.
and stuff like that in upstate New York. There probably was. And my thought,
listen, it's so before the time change and during the time change.
February in upstate New York has got to be similar to this.
It does. It's
I would imagine
cold.
It would have taken longer
yes.
than it would have in September. So there was additional testimony. I'm not going to give you all of this because it's super repetitive about the murder weapon. Obviously, the yellow maul handle, clothes that were collected from the swamp. These are clothes that Michael was wearing. They also looked at clothes that Thomas Clayton was wearing. Of course, there was no blood on any of it because he hired somebody to do it according to the prosecutor's opinion in this case.
Yes.
A Matt Lunger, who worked at a glass container factory, testified he got a call from Clayton about a week before the murder and asked if they were hiring. He told him he had a friend who'd just been fired from Surf Pro and was looking for work. Mm-hmm. And then Richard Flood of Erie Insurance testified he received a claim from Clayton for bodily fluid cleanup at his home. He said Clayton was seeking coverage on sheets, jeans, etc., but never claimed on any stolen property like an alleged lockbox safe.
Interesting.
So interesting that he made a claim, but never mentioned again that something was missing.
Right.
The defense made a point on cross to say that Clayton just wanted to make a property damage claim due to the trauma in his home. Like he wasn't gonna. Why did you report the safe? He was just reporting, DNA things that had been destroyed by his wife's body. Mm-hmm. A DNA analyst testified as well. That Michael Beard's DNA was found on the bloody black T-shirt recovered from the swamp.
Yeah.
And then Dean Swan. And Dean Swan is our sheriff's deputy who was the first to respond. He testified that he did first search the home to make sure a perpetrator had left. This is the officer wearing body camera the entire time. You can't get a more honest cop than Mr. Swan. Okay. Because it is all out there on video. Right. There's nothing for this man to lie about. It's all right there. And the jury was allowed to watch the entire DVD, 50 minutes of body cam footage the next day on February 15th. Our defendant, Thomas Clayton, burst into tears in the courtroom while watching the video.
Well, of
he
course,
was there.
He is on show. Mm-hmm.
And it shows in the video that Thomas is visibly upset when he gets there. Mm-hmm. He says, I came home and my daughter said there was a robbery in the house. That was the first thing Clayton says on the video. Swan sees Kelley on the floor. He escorts Clayton out of the house and said, you don't need to see this anymore. He takes Clayton to his car and says, you're not in trouble. But he asked him to wait by the car. Yeah. He asked to see Clayton's hands. He didn't see smart, by the way.
Yes.
He didn't observe any blood on him. He then told other officers he's clean. And then he asked a neighbor if he'd ever seen any problems at the Clayton's home. And the neighbor replied, no, I haven't seen any problems here. He was concerned, Deputy Swan, that the assailant might still be in the house. So he clears the house and then checks for signs of forced entry. Mm-hmm. And I think the defense is trying to say here, well, you had already just, come into the home. Well, so did Thomas.
Right.
But forced entry has some specific things that you look for. Again, and there's groove marks. Used with burglary tools.
But also, I think that this body cam footage is good to show that, yes, he asked to see his hands and things like that, but he got him out. He wasn't just here, he
wasn't accusatory then.
Right.
No.
He was gathering the information.
He is also trying to keep it safe. He secures the house and then he brings a paramedic in to check on Kelley. We know it's too late. He says to her, it's extremely bloody. Paramedic sees Kelley. She goes, oh my God. Yeah. It's all on the video.
Right.
And then several times in the video, Swan tells officers then that he believes Clayton is a suspect and that this is likely a domestic gone wrong.
Listen. The investigation always has to start somewhere, people.
I think where he's criticized, you have to remember that Deputy Swan just rolled up on something and he's doing his investigation. And is there some amount of bias at that point? Possibly.
Right. But he sees no signs of forced entry.
Right. So is he sounding biased? Yes. Is he using that lead to go all the way down that rabbit hole before he goes on to chase the next? I think possibly.
Yes.
Here are the things that rub people wrong and rub the defense wrong specifically. When he's telling about the investigators that show up on the scene, the situation, he uses sentences like he claims his story is. Mm-hmm. Take it for what it's worth. I've heard it's a tale as old as time. This is how some investigators handle this.
I won't say that I'm not guilty of using that language too during investigations of like, well, here's their story.
And if your investigation gets disproven, if it can't be proved, then there's just a history of you following that line before you realize you're wrong and move on to the next one.
Exactly, because you have to start somewhere.
So Deputy Swan asked Clayton, did you touch her or anything? He says, no, I threw the blanket over her.
Okay, he did cover her?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes me feel better. Honestly. I mean, I know
apologize
he hired
that
this.
I didn't recall that beforehand, but here's the thing.
Well, you remembered that it does come up.
It comes up, but it never comes up what he threw the blanket over.
Oh, okay.
He wouldn't touch her because her face was so beat in.
Right.
I don't know what he threw. Did he throw it over her entire body?
Right. Just her genitals.
There's no indication.
Right. Or yes, probably his entire body.
There's photos though. Just so you guys know, I don't know that because I did not have access to the crime scene photos. The jury got to see photos, and I would assume that they got to see that as well. During cross, the defense said to Deputy Swan, what I just said. You had already decided Clayton was a suspect in this case. And Swan says, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Based on what I'd seen at the crime scene, it didn't appear to be a robbery. Mm-hmm. Common practice to make sure a person at the scene is not a suspect. Yep. Before Whedon arrested, they offered Clayton's birth certificate into evidence. Weird, but Thomas Clayton's birth certificate was offered in.
That is odd.
I threw it in because it was offered in. I imagine that it was to cover the maybe identification and some technical issues.
Oh, okay.
But I found it strange that it was brought up. And maybe it was just brought up in this way because that's how the trial reporter reported it.
Sure.
Prosecutor Wetmore had called 65 witnesses to the stand and entered more than 400 pieces of evidence. Damn. And then he rested. That was the last thing he did before he arrested the case. Mm-hmm. So Thomas Clayton's defense called its first two witnesses to the stand, including the owner of an auto shop where Clayton was a routine customer. That's Belinda Wilcox. And she testified that it wasn't unusual for Clayton to borrow a phone from the store.
Oh, God.
I am not supposed to be laughing.
Dear Lord.
Previous testimony had alleged Clayton used the phone to contact Michael Beard on the day Kelley Clayton was killed. This is one of the other phones that was used to contact Beard. Remember, there was a couple phone calls.
You said that.
But she did say, Belinda did, that it wasn't unusual for him to borrow a phone. And she said he was a very friendly man and he treated my employees with great respect.
Good.
On February 16th, it's still defense witnesses. Dale Patridge, a private investigator, testified he took pictures of the Clayton home in January of 2016, specifically under the Clayton's bed, where he spotted markings.
Really?
That was where safe was supposed to be, Charnell. So 3 months later, he comes back to the home and he takes pictures under the bed where there was a stolen safe that had never been reported until and there were marks there to
until after he knew he needed some sort of starting to come up with some sort of
the prosecution pointed out that the photos were taken months after the murder.
Thank you.
And Patridge responded, the PI, they didn't look fresh. So
those
marks were old. They were there. Tammy Black, who's an office manager, ServPro, testified about a personal check that Clayton had written to Beard to help him pay his DMV fines, Department of Motor Vehicles, adding up to more than $800. She also testified that he provided a personal check to help Beard to assist him with rent. And Arthur Sable from Community Bank said that he was working on a loan in September of 2015. So right around the month before, for Clayton and Brian Lang. Remember, they're going into business.
Yeah.
He testified that they were looking to take out a loan
for $100,000.
But isn't it strange because wasn't it testified before that he had the money for it, the cash?
He had that's why the $100,000 was in his truck because he was going to pay for it.
I think that's where he's saying that he testified that Clayton had a strong credit score, and he also went through his credit history, and he testified that Lang and Clayton were looking to take out a loan for that new building, and were supposed to close on the loan in mid-October.
Uh-huh.
Okay? Uh-huh. Rob Wilcox is a dude that owns M&M Auto with his wife, and he and Clayton have become good friends. He testified, there's bad cell service inside the building, and it wasn't out of the ordinary for Clayton to use a landline. So another place that he would come and make calls.
Okay.
The week before Kelley was killed, Clayton scheduled an appointment to detail Kelley's car. Wilcox said Clayton may have been dropping in on the day of Kelley's death to check on scheduled work or just to say hi. So he was either checking in about that appointment, about detailing, or he sometimes stopped just to say hi. The prosecutor pointed out on cross that Clayton was only at M&M Auto for 4 minutes that day. There were also 6, so enough time to make a phone call.
For sure.
Yeah. 6 witnesses ended up taking the stand for the defense, and the defense was trying to show that the murder was actually the result of a burglary. That PI, that Patridge, who took the stand first, he was continuing on this line of the safe and testified multiple times, as private investigators often do, about all of the issues that had come up with the police investigation and how they couldn't have noticed that.
So the prosecution had 64 witnesses and the defense had 6?
Yeah, I'm going to get to that too. We're almost done with the trial, and then I have a few more things to say. But on February 17th, Thomas Clayton's mom, Phyllis, took the stand, and she testified. This is so weird, Charnell. She testified she had been planning a trip to visit Tom and Kelley on September 28th. Okay? So mom's testifying that she was coming to see the kids. I'm assuming that this is so... I mean, why would he have chosen to have his wife killed if his mom was coming to town?
Right.
This is why.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
Well, Phyllis says she filled out a time off request in September, or for September 28th to October 4th. And she was the general manager and she didn't need approval. So she filled out a time off request, but she was the one who would have filled that and been able.
So why did she?
There's no real record.
Why would she fill it out?
Because
if it's not needed.
Okay, this is an assumption.
I know exactly why she did it.
The assumption is that after this all happened, she filled out a time off slip and didn't have to have approval, so there was proof. She says she talked to Kelley about the visit, her daughter-in-law, on September 24th, and on the 28th told Clayton to expect her that night, the night of the murder.
Yeah, yeah.
But Phyllis said she got caught up at work and was too tired to drive to New York, so she didn't go. Well, during cross-examination, the prosecutor asked if she called or texted Tom or Kelley to let them know she wasn't coming.
Right.
And she said no. Well, the prosecutor also points out that there was no mention of Phyllis's trip in any of Kelley and Tom's text interactions.
Right, right.
Kelley had also been texting a friend on September 28th about going to a furniture store the next day with no mention, my mother-in-law is going to be here.
Also, was there a room ready for her? Like, if she hadn't texted and said that she wasn't coming, would Kelley have went to sleep expecting her mother-in-law still, locking the doors and all of that?
Yep.
Come on.
Well, Phyllis Clayton's boyfriend, so this is, she's obviously not married to Thomas's dad anymore, right. Robert Bates. Robert takes the stand because he testified Phyllis's bags were packed on September 28th to corroborate. See, this is one of those things where what does this have to do with the murder? It doesn't. It has to do with him corroborating what Phyllis was saying, even though the prosecutor is calling bullshit.
Yes. Yep.
Bates also said that the time off request form had been hanging on Phyllis's office door for a couple weeks. Yep. Mm-hmm. After 6 weeks of testimony from the prosecution, the defense in the Thomas Clayton trial rested after just 3 days.
Wow. Okay. A 6-week trial and 3 days of it was defense.
I am going to tell you, this is super long, but I got to go through the closings because the closings are good. This is going to be a long episode, guys.
We're here.
The defense attorney Ray Schlather spent 2.5 hours presenting his closing arguments to the jury. He started by saying there's no real evidence that Thomas has anything to do with his wife's death. He didn't kill his wife. He didn't hire Michael Beard to kill his wife. He said there was a rush to judgment, pointing the finger at deputy's body camera from the night of the murder with statements like, he's a suspect, it was a domestic, and argued that Clayton being a suspect just spread like wildfire from one officer to the other. Like they cannot make decisions on their own and they almost join in like lemurs.
Right. Mine.
The seagulls.
Yes.
He reads to the jurors some of the statements that Deputy Swan made, as I indicated before. He says then, this is an incomplete investigation. He pointed to the safe and overturned table that were never examined, the inside of the safe, remember?
Yeah.
He said no effort was made to investigate the alleged missing lockbox under the couple's bed. And he said there was altered bloodstains at the foot of the bed, the area next to the alleged lockbox. And he said that must have been Beard trying to find it. But there's no other proof of that. His theory was that Beard was looking under the bed for the lockbox when Kelley ran down the hall. Like he hit her and was looking for the lockbox, and then she ran down the hall, and that's when he chased her and finished her off.
Okay.
Then he starts talking about Luke's truck, and he says, they want you to believe it was involved in this murder, and there's no proof. He said there's no evidence of blood anywhere in Luke Tatro's truck, and Mark Blanford said it wasn't the same truck. The defense said it was a huge mistake that Mark Blanford and Larry Johnson's phones were never examined. That's the problem here. If those would have been examined, apparently it would have exonerated him completely.
Changed everything.
He said Beard and Johnson Michael Beard and Larry Johnson, who's this other dude who apparently had information.
Like now he's being implicated?
Yeah, they were angry with Clayton and they were going to do something about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Except it doesn't make sense to me.
We have nothing to show he was angry.
No. Michael, I mean, for crying out loud, Clayton had been helping Michael. He paid his DMV things. He's helped him with rent. They talked 68 times a month.
Uh-huh. He also, remember, he spent a lot of time discrediting that Cy Ray, who was testimony about the phone stuff. He said digital tracking was narrowly focused and misleading. There was manipulation of latitude and longitude, directions are hard, and that the numbers are made up, quote unquote.
I'm sorry. What?
It was manipulation. He was saying that he tried to discredit Cy, remember? And so now he's basically trying to say that he forged and altered. He actually asked him that. Did you alter the information from Google? Yes. I altered Google Docs. Because, it's not like they keep the originals and you couldn't go back and say, here's an original.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you didn't discredit anything, man. You can't make up the latitude and longitude that couldn't be corroborated. Right. Like, what? So he's word salading. Yes. These jurors is what he's doing because he's proven nothing.
Right. Okay. He doesn't have to.
I know he doesn't.
The defense doesn't have to prove a damn thing.
He's just trying to confuse them.
He is. And that's their job. He has to poke holes in the prosecutor's case. Right. Especially if he truly believes that his client got set up and didn't do anything. Mm-hmm. Especially if he truly believes, and some people do, that Michael Beard is a murderer and did this all on his own and it was all because he was angry. And you guys have the evidence, so you can decide. But in terms of the closing arguments, what he is continuing with is that none of Thomas's actions leading up to the murder were out of the ordinary. He's saying that if you take Kelley's death out of the equation for a moment, you'll recognize it's just Tom being Tom with his routines.
Okay.
Yep.
So yes, if we just take that one small thing, someone's murder.
He said there's no motive, and Clayton had no financial...
That is not true. There's means, motive, and opportunity here.
But he's saying there was no financial distress because he said Tom increased Kelley's life insurance policy because he was offered a better deal, twice the coverage, half the cost, which is what his friend, the life insurance guy, testified, and they doubled both of them.
And I don't think the money necessarily was the biggest motivator here.
No, then one of the motivators is that he just didn't want to be married.
Correct.
And that's this part. He then has to justify the sexual activity.
Yes. And not only that, this dude loves money too.
Yeah.
Okay. He loves banging and he loves throwing around money like he's, some fucking royalty.
He loves banging in cash.
Yeah. Man. So it doesn't I think the money is is actually the secondary motive here.
He didn't want to be married anymore.
No.
Wanted to be free. He said
he's also the type of guy though that wouldn't want somebody else having his wife.
Probably. He knew that he had made statements, if you recall, that she would take everything. Mm-hmm. And he didn't want that.
He's not going to share. He need that money.
This is also a man that if the plan was for him to burn down the house, his children were in it, you guys.
Yep, exactly.
His children were in the house. Even if he... Oh, my God.
That's all that you need to know
about who he is.
Yep.
He said there's no motive, no financial distress. About the sexual activities, there were no relationships, no other women that he loved. This was purely physical. The affairs. This was a guy who had, I don't know, too much testosterone.
Oh my God. That's what they literally said. The
defense attorney argued, this is a guy who had, I don't know, too much testosterone.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, that defense lawyer literally just threw all of you under the bus to say that you would all be so testosterone driven that you can't control yourself around other people that you're attracted to.
I know that guy. He's testosterone-y. It's the real San Francisco treat. He said there's no way that Tom knew that this was going to happen. The whole phone call was about the deer blinds that night at the poker game.
Right.
He borrowed it because his phone was dying, and he wanted to flirt with Linda Miller that night.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, that's the first time that came up, though.
Interesting. In closing arguments, that's the first time that came up?
Yep. He said Tom was wanting to help Beard, but he didn't know the horrible, horrible anger Beard had in his soul. He said that Beard is truly evil and truly messed up, desperate and angry that he wasn't getting work. He knew that Beard knew that Clayton was playing poker that night, so he knew he could go to the house. He said that Clayton never saw this angry side of Beard and thought, maybe I can save him, maybe I can help him. It just, quote unquote, just doesn't make sense for Tom to have done what the prosecution said he did. There's no motive. He didn't want his wife dead. He loved his kids. He also pointed out that his mother was visiting supposed to be that night. He's not a killer or someone who would contract a killer. This is a horrible tragedy. And then he also thanked the jury and said he'd never seen such an attentive jury.
Buttering them up.
Now,
you're the best jury I've ever seen.
At this point in the case, one of the second-degree charges was dropped by the prosecution. This happens, you guys. As you go through your case, you're determining if you have met your proofs.
Right.
And so for whatever reason, they dropped it. Although I'm sitting over here in my lawyer mind, and I'm going to tell you why when we get to the appeal, but I don't understand why he was charged with it to begin with. Like, it makes no sense. One person died. You could be charged with that in a conspiracy. But other than that, like, it blows my mind. So he was facing at the time of closing arguments one count of both first degree and then another count of second degree.
Okay.
Prosecutor Wetmore spent more than 2 hours presenting his closing arguments. He started off by refuting the defense closing arguments and simply said, what defense counsel just said to you is not evidence, not one shred of it.
Right.
Just what you just said.
Yes.
He went over evidence that proved that Beard was the one who actually killed Kelley. He focused on the fact that there had clearly never been any animosity toward Beard and Clayton, and that Beard was never even upset with Clayton. He didn't fire him, you guys. The boss fired him.
That's super important because it shows that they had a mutual friendship. Another reason why he would be willing to go along with what Clayton's asking him to do or paying him to do.
You got it. The prosecutor focused on the actions that Thomas Clayton and Michael Beard took in the 12 days leading up to the murder between September 17th and the 29th. The 17th is when Beard was fired. Texts that day suggest that Beard is not upset and that everything's fine. And then,
because he knew he was doing the drugs and stealing.
Yeah, well, and Clayton is still trying to help him.
So it wasn't Clayton that fired him. It was Lang.
Correct. On September 20th, Beard was trying to figure out how to pay Clayton rent. Yeah. So Clayton sets up a meeting with Beard for the next day. On September 21, the phone scan showed Clayton and Beard met up at Clayton's home, and Beard texted Clayton, "Need a bike."
Oh.
Well, prosecution says for what? This guy owes Clayton rent, and now all of a sudden he's giving him a bike? Mm-hmm. So then on the next day, on the 22nd, Clayton goes to Beard's apartment, and he argues that's the day. That's the day he dropped the bike off.
Yes.
Okay? Because we know he was there. His GPS located there. Yep. Speculating. Circumstantial evidence, of course, but that's when he dropped the bike off. On September 23rd, both Beard and Clayton were in the same area near ServPro. This is when Wetmore, prosecutor guys, believes that Clayton gave Beard his white truck. He reads back Larry Johnson's testimony that he and Beard drove to the Clayton home on September 23rd in Tom's truck. Beard leaves the truck, remember, for 30 minutes and then returns. Wetmore says this is when the murder was supposed to happen. At 1:53 a.m. on September 24th, Beard texts Clayton, "When you can, call me." So Clayton calls him the next morning. On September 26th, Clayton texts Luke Tatro about swapping trucks on the Monday. It's the only text he deletes that day. Mm-hmm. He uses Eminem's auto phone to call Beard on 9/28. These are not ordinary facts. This is a quote, by the way, from the reporter. Wetmore said, he had his cell phone all day, but he calls Michael Beard from this place?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then they meet in person that evening, and he says, really, is this can't all be about getting a notice of eviction. Are any of Thomas Clayton's actions consistent with him providing Beard the means and opportunities to commit this crime? Also, Beard didn't do anything without getting paid. Quote unquote, Clayton was his lifeline. Mm-hmm. If he was meeting for something, it was to get paid. Mm-hmm. Wetmore said the evidence showed this is when Clayton gave Beard Luke Tatro's red truck. At 10:53 p.m., Clayton again borrows a phone to call Beard. They're going to try and run away from this phone call, he says. How are you going to try and run away from this? We have no evidence that Clayton's phone is on the fritz. It's obviously working. We know it is.
Right.
There's no evidence that this was about offering Beard work at this time. And he argues, although it's circumstantial, this is the go call.
Yeah.
This is the kill. This is the I'm going to go kill a bitch.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Then he moves on to Michael's actions when he gets home and sees Kelley on the kitchen floor. You're going to like Prosecutor Wetmore. He says, quote unquote, let's assume he's innocent and there's Kelley bleeding. What would you expect this man to do? Would he check on her? Would he kneel down? He apparently tiptoed around her. He's got no blood on him whatsoever. This is the wife, the mother of his children, lying on the floor. Mm-hmm. And I'm always careful with that. I think he took a A brave stance making that impassioned plea because, again, we've seen cases where that was not the case and the man was not guilty.
Right.
He questioned why Clayton kept bringing up this robbery. His wife's been slaughtered. Yeah. Why does he keep bringing up a robbery?
Right.
Why is this what's bothering you, man? There are, quote unquote, no signs of forced entry, no signs of a robbery, and no signs that anything was missing.
And he didn't report anything missing either.
Well, he's trying to say he wasn't. Remember, the defense tried to poke holes that they didn't take him through to see if anything was missing.
But that's why, because he never said there was something.
Yep. Prosecutors there are so many stories about why is this money in Clayton's truck? Was it for a building or was it for the casino?
Right.
The money was taken out of the house, kept in his truck, and put there because the home was supposed to be torched.
Yes, exactly.
His passport and his money.
Yep.
He also brought up why Clayton stayed in the house. Is the killer in the house? How did he know it was safe?
Right. Yep.
The prosecutor says when Clayton was questioned about who might have done this, the name Michael Beard never came from his lips.
Yep.
Noticeably absent from his timeline also was the truck swap with Beard. Mm-hmm. Why did he leave that out? He read the testimony of Clayton's mistresses, specifically the horrible things that Clayton would say about Kelley to them. Mm-hmm. What was the motive, Wetmore said? He wanted out. Mm-hmm. Quote unquote, Thomas Clayton is incapable of love.
And how many times have we said divorce was an option? Right.
Well, it is. It was.
People do kill their spouses to get out of the marriage.
Right.
It's horrible, but they do.
In this case, if this is all true, it appears that he was ready to be out of his family because he wanted the place torched.
Yes.
If we believe that's the case.
Yes. True. Yep.
Unless he was going to come home and save them.
Oh.
The kids. I mean, I don't know what kind of cape he wore that night.
Right.
But it wasn't a red Superman one.
Little heroism. Mm-hmm.
The prosecutor is aware that this is a case almost entirely based off of circumstantial evidence. It is all circumstantial evidence because he didn't kill her physically in person. And he overwhelmingly urged the jury to use their common sense. Mm-hmm. February 22nd, the judge officially charged the jury and deliberations began. I like this judge. He reminds the jurors that they are the judges of fact and they are to deliver a verdict free of passion or prejudice. It ended the first day without a verdict. They did ask a lot of questions. They asked to be read back some in testimony from Tammy Black, who was the manager at ServPro, where Clayton and Beard used to work. Mm-hmm. They also wanted to see Clayton and Beard's phone records for the month of September.
Mm-hmm. I think that's all very good when they're taking their job seriously and looking at the evidence.
Well, I can tell you that we reached the end of our case finally on February 23rd, 2017.
Okay.
He was found guilty by a Steuben County jury.
Okay.
Of both first and second degree murders.
Okay.
All right. Now, before we go over some information, I have to tell you that this was appealed.
Sure.
So here's what happens. I love the appeals filed October of 2018. And Thomas Clayton, they describe him as appearing in a dark green prison jumpsuit, shackled at his hands and feet, as his attorney, Ray Schlather, argues against the expert testimony of cell phone analyst Cy Ray. He says the jury got it wrong and they want a new trial. If there ever, this is a quote, if there ever was a case that requires the court to intervene and make it right, it's the case.
What?
Thomas Clayton is innocent of this murder. He is really attacking that cell phone underlying data. And then he also has an issue with newly discovered. He's saying, he also told the judge the defense's argument is not newly discovered evidence. And the defense knew of this expert during trial, this Cy Ray. He's saying he has another expert. The defense has an expert who will come in and basically come to a clear conclusion that Cy Ray was making stuff up. So there's evidence.
First of all, why didn't you put that in the first trial then?
You're so smart. It's like you're a justice. It's like you're an appellate court judge.
Like, dude.
Okay. People versus Clayton. This is a 2019 New York through the appellate division. Anybody can look up this case. It was and then it was actually decided on August 22nd, 2019 by the Supreme Court of the State of New York, which is their appellate division, 4th Judicial Division. The long and the short of it is that, because I could read this to you verbatim, but you can look it up if you want. It was an appeal from judgment of the Steuben County Court. The judgment convicted the defendant upon a jury verdict of murder in the first degree and murder in the second degree. That appellate court ordered that the judgment so appealed from was modified on the law by reversing the part convicting the defendant of murder in the second degree and dismissing count 2 of the indictment as a modified judgment. I want to point out to you, did any of that I read to you, did any of that have anything to do with what the defense attorney just said?
Not at all.
That's because of this entire appeal where he is complaining about what happened. He never even brought that up. They on their own realized, yeah, this is my favorite part about the case. So,
oh my gosh.
First.
So the appeals court is the one that points out that charge shouldn't have.
In his arguments, the defense attorney, he's talking about how there was legally insufficient evidence. And this is a quote, "We reject the defendant's contention that the evidence is legally insufficient to establish that pursuant to the agreement," that's the agreement to kill, "the principal, Beard, committed the killing, quote unquote, for the receipt or in expectation of the receipt of a thing of pecuniary value."
Yeah.
The people, prosecutor, identifies several things of pecuniary value that the defendant offered to the principal, including a bicycle, a promise to pay an outstanding fee, and referrals for new employment. Indeed, there is no dispute that in the days leading up to the murder, defendant gave the principal, Beard, a bicycle, which was not only a thing of pecuniary value, but also an instrumentality in the crime. Mm-hmm. Also, cell phone records establish that the principal sent defendant a text message 5 days before the murder asking, quote unquote, for a little bit. In our view, that message, read in context, could be construed as a request for money.
Mm-hmm. Like in advance.
The defense is trying to state that there wasn't enough the circumstantial evidence to lead to the appropriate conclusion of a conviction. So what the appellate court does here is they state that based off of what they see, a rational jury could have inferred, in light of the principal, Beard's, subsequent actions, that defendant procured commission of the killings by making an agreement pursuant to which the principal would kill the victim in exchange for something of value. Now, there is a dissent where they agree, all of them agree there's sufficient evidence that the defendant is complicit in the wife's murder, mm-hmm. and all of them agree that the evidence that the principal, and they called the principal being the actual murderer, Beard,
yes.
Requested a payment of money from the defendant only 5 days before. But the dissent actually said that they were thinking that part of a string of otherwise innocent interactions between defendant and the principal in the days leading up to the murder, it could have been a possibility that the jury shouldn't have seen it that way. In our view, the jury could rationally have concluded that the principal's request for a payment of money was not innocent at all, but was in fact part of the parcel of a murder plan. The dissent doesn't really mean anything, you guys. It was just their opinion that either way they could have seen the jury make a logical conclusion one way or the mm-hmm. other. But here's the part that gets interesting. As I told you about the whole appeal, it literally says, although not raised by the defendant, the count charging him with intentional murder in the second degree must be dismissed.
Oh my God.
As a lesser included count of murder in the first degree.
Does that ever happen? That all of a sudden the appeals court is like, by the way.
Therefore, we modify the judgment accordingly. In light of that determination, we need not reach defendant's contentions concerning the weight and sufficiency of the evidence with respect to murder in the second degree conviction because they booed it.
Right.
So the defense also had argued in there that there wasn't a disclosure of some material. They find that lacked merit completely because the defendant failed to establish prejudice. Because of a late disclosure. And then they also denied the defense, and this is all in the appeal, a request for a Fry hearing, which is an evidentiary hearing. He was trying to argue that whole thing about the dude, the scientist, the data.
Yeah, manipulating it and it not
he says, and this is what I think is really interesting in the appeal, they reject it because they're saying the people's expert didn't concern a novel scientific theory, technique, or procedure. Instead, it gave deductions made from cell phone site data in a manner consistent with the generally accepted scientific process. So the two things that he actually...
wasn't manipulating anything.
But again, it was interesting that that information was kind of, given that way.
Yeah.
That's where
that's funny. It's like, well, you didn't ask for this, but we're actually going to, take off the conviction of the second degree because it shouldn't have been there. But like, you guys weren't smart enough to figure that out.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So the appeal is over then. Now, the attorney did say, so the New York Appellate Court, they upheld the first-degree murder conviction for Thomas, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Again, he had originally been convicted of first and second degree, and no possibility of parole.
Okay, I was going to ask.
That lesser-included second-degree murder charge was dropped. And if anybody goes and looks it up, you're going to be like, hey, the dissent also said, in the dissent, they thought maybe they should have dismissed the first degree and just sentenced on the second. Well, that makes no sense. Because if they found enough to convict on the first degree, then there is enough to already find the lesser included offense. That's why the second degree was dismissed.
Was dropped, right. And yeah,
I'm
that
so
makes
sorry
sense.
this is all technical or boring to you guys, but I couldn't believe it to begin with. I just found it so weird.
And also, his trial, he's not on trial for being the one to actually murder her, right?
No.
He is on trial for murder for hire, which shows a meditation.
And if you're involved in that, you are guilty of the actual act.
Yes.
That's how the first degree, and that's what they found, and that's why they set aside the second degree. So since his first degree murder conviction was upheld, it states he will continue to serve that life sentence. He's at Sing Sing Correctional Facility in Ossining, New York, without the possibility of parole. And this is where he remains, although his defense attorneys have stated that he would continue to appeal.
I'm sure he'll exhaust them.
Right. Mm-hmm. All right. So custody of Charlie and Cullen was given to Kelly's sister, Kim.
Oh.
And she read a statement from Charlie at her dad's sentencing.
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
She said, quote unquote, Charlie actually wrote a letter on her own that she loved her mom and she loved her dad, but that her dad was a coward because he made Michael Beard kill mommy.
Oh, my gosh. Oh.
Kim also addressed the people of Canton, thanking the community and every investigator during the sentencing. So in small towns, Charnell, this Canton, New York, in 3 centuries of history, to put this into perspective, they had a few conflict. Notably, they had a name change when their town changed from Wormley to Canton. They had some flash floods in 1916, 1920, and 1936. And they had a horrific fire at the town hall in 1972. And those are the worst things to happen.
Oh my
This
goodness.
changed everything.
Yeah.
After the media storm, when Thomas was sentenced, the town was still covered in purple ribbons and Justice for Kelly lawn signs. Kim said in an interview, I think this was with 2020 that I watched, that her family, Kelly's family, tries to move forward the best they can. Mm-hmm. She said, those kids, that's what gets me up every day. I have got to keep going. She said she's grateful to have her sister's children because they help her stay present.
Aww.
To Thomas, she would only say, he killed her, but he didn't kill her light. She will make sure Kelley Clayton's memory lives on. On March of 2017, so after he was convicted, the Elmira Jackals hockey team hosted a domestic violence awareness night in memory of Kelley Clayton.
That's amazing.
All ticket proceeds were to support the children who were there to drop the first puck.
Aww.
And that's how I'm going to end it.
Now you're making me cry.
I know.
Oh.
But I love that this hockey team
honestly, that's where it started.
It did.
And then here we go.
Mm-hmm. And they were cognizant of one of their own did something terrible, but they came together to do something for that woman.
Yep.
That
and
woman
spread awareness and
Kelly
and his
and
kids.
threw the whole domestic violence piece out there, and created awareness because of it. So that was it. The last thing I noted was that the kids are still doing well with their aunt and uncle, and that's where we are.
Amazing coverage of that case, my friend.
Well, like I said, most of it has to do with some really good trial transcripts, and I'm sorry if I read it to you too much, but
I found it fascinating. It was like we were on the whole ride.
The anatomy of a murder for hire, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And how difficult those court cases can be, truly, when you really look at what you have to prove evidentiary.
Does anybody feel exhausted?
Yeah,
it's
a lot.
It is exhausting physically and mentally to sit through those and sit through those every day. For the jurors, for the court.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody in the court, the families. Yeah. The whoever is giving the testimony at the time. Oh,
you got it.
Been there. Okay, so I will bathe you since you've been talking for 2 hours.
Thank you.
And actually, we recorded both episodes at once, so we've been like on almost hour 5 of recording.
A lot of talking.
It has, yes. I'm going to give you, this was from a list verse article on February 11th, 2023. 10 hilarious excuses people gave police to cover a crime. Number 10. This is not a burglary. It's a free house. A couple decided to try to make fast cash illegally by stealing. However, luck ran out on them and the victim caught them in the act. Charles and Pernella Bull had both ridden bicycles to a house in St. Paul, Minnesota, and started taking out items from the home. The items stolen included like a full toolbox, a computer desktop, laptops, all this stuff. Kids, the victim was putting her kids to bed upstairs when she heard strange sounds in the house, and she caught them. All right. So they're arrested, and they told police that they should not be charged because they did not commit burglary. A friend told them that the victim's house had been listed as a free house on Craigslist, so they felt that they could walk away with the items without consequence.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. An officer searched for the
all you can take.
Yep. An officer searched for the victim's house on Craigslist under the free section, but couldn't find it.
Right, because it wasn't there.
Okay.
It wasn't there.
Let's see. Number 9. This banned substance is a prescription.
What?
Yep. So some dude is charged in court by having a banned substance.
This happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. He was subsequently charged. The lawyer...
What?
Let's see.
Are you trying to pronounce his name?
No, this is the article. When Sylvester Stallone was caught illegally importing 48 vials of human growth hormone into Australia during a promotional trip in February 2007, he said a medical doctor prescribed the banned substance. He was subsequently charged in court, and his lawyer told another lie. Stallone was using the substance under a doctor's supervision for an undisclosed medical condition. Throughout Stallone's ordeal, no doctor's name was mentioned. It's important that we bring it to your notice that Stallone, who lives in the United States, could have gotten a prescription from a medical practitioner in the U.S. because the substance is banned, or could not have, because the substance is banned in the United States and is not legally available for retail use. Stallone was fined $2,500. I didn't realize that I was reading about the actual Sylvester Stallone.
You just saw it. It was like, oh, look, somebody
I thought it was a dude,
name.
And then I was like,
holy shit, this
why
is
is that
Sylvester
Sly?
Stallone.
What's happening? Yeah, I didn't know it was
Sly.
him. Mm-hmm.
I expected more from you. I thought those muscles were natural.
Yes, all natural.
God, why do they always have to be fake? He was on the juice.
Shoot. Exactly. Number 8, this one, I won't read the whole thing, but she told police, I kept one eye closed while driving to prevent me from seeing double.
That is awesome.
Ma'am, do you believe that your level of intoxication impaired you? And she's like, no, as long as I keep one eye closed, I can see everything.
I am fine. Well. I'm fine. Number 7. A DV guy arrested in Amherst, Ohio, said he was violent because of the full moon. Exactly.
I feel like I want to be violent during the full moon too.
This one probably happens a lot. Number 6. That's not mine. I was looking after all the cannabis for a friend. Just keeping it alive.
A babysitter.
Yep.
Bud sitter.
For a cannabis. No. Number 5. He fell on the knife that caused his injury. Damn it. Such the luck. That's what you get for being a klutz.
He is covering for his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm. Well, yep. Mm-hmm. He absolutely is. There she is.
In all her glory?
She was sentenced to 18 months in jail, just so you know.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Do you feel like you have to have done something pretty bad as a guy that when you get stabbed by your girlfriend, you tell the police, well, I fell?
I actually fell on that. Yeah. Like, what did he do to deserve the stabbing?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
No, he's obviously a victim of a terribly bad domestic violence relationship. Or
right.
She is.
Yes.
And you're having some
exactly,
which I've seen before.
Yep.
You finally have had enough. You're going to get yourself out the situation.
And you don't want that stuff coming up, so you're just going to say, I fell on it.
Oh, I fell on it. I've heard that once before with some interesting ER visits, but they didn't. They weren't a knife, and they didn't end up in his stomach.
It came up in some of my child sexual conduct investigations. I can tell you that. I just tripped and fell into her vagina.
Yeah, I heard that defense as well.
If I had $1 for every time my husband tripped and fell into my vagina.
How big is that vagina that someone can trip and
That's
fall
what I'm
into
saying.
it?
Like, come on.
I fell and it just so happened that I accidentally, wow.
Nope.
The only time there's an actual penetration of any kind is when you fall off of your bike seat and hit that pole.
No truer words have ever been spoken, my friend. Oh, that is a hymen breaker.
Potentially.
Damn it. Okay, number 4. I might actually read this whole one because I don't know what it's all about. It says,
shit. Are you blind reading? We know what happens
we are
when
cold
you blind
reading.
read.
This could turn ugly. Okay. Everyone strap in. Number 4. I didn't want my McDonald's to get cold.
Oh, God.
It starts with, in a bizarre incident, South Yorkshire police officers got more than what they bargained for when they stopped a motorist for speeding recklessly. It turned out the man had been rushing home because he didn't want his McDonald's meal to get cold, and he was proud to disclose this was the case to the police. Okay, he did get a ticket. I guess I didn't think that's why he would be speeding, but
nobody wants to eat cold fast food. If you're eating it, first of all, why don't you pull over
eat it
and
in your car?
I know,
right? That's what I do.
Don't be a sociopath. Eat it in your car. Eat it parked in McDonald's.
Thank you.
You're being introverted. You go through the drive-thru and you literally go park in their own parking lot to eat your fast food. For me, it's the shame.
I do it. And me too. I do it every time I go to Culver's because I know those fucking cheese curds are not good for me, but I crave them.
Also, I don't want those to be cold and rubbery.
Not at all.
So you either have to speed or you have to eat
there. And people see me enjoying I'm listening to a podcast and I'm eating my butter burger and cheese curds. And I'm loving life when I'm doing it.
It's just your own therapy at that point.
It is.
Self-care.
Yes.
Self-care.
And then later in the gym, I'm like, fucking butter burgers.
It was the butter burger.
Cheese curds. No, those would never do me wrong. It's the butter burger I blame. I'm doing extra crunches. And I'm like, damn the butter burger. You could have just had the cheese curds. You glutton. Oh, okay. Number 3. This one I might use, although I don't have a cat.
Oh, God, I do.
My cat downloaded. Oh, no, I didn't see that word. This I would not do. I'm so sorry. I didn't see this word. Bad. Fucking cold reading, Charnell, every time.
Disregard.
It says,
disregard.
My cat downloaded child pornography on my computer. I skipped over the word child. I thought it was just saying my cat downloaded pornography on my computer.
That is a fucking lie.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, you think?
Come on.
His cat did it.
Your cat?
Oh, shit.
That is fantastic.
It's a Florida man.
Oh,
Florida man, Keith Griffin, was caught with more than 1,000 images of child pornography on his computer, and he immediately proclaimed that his innocence and gave an explanation that your cat with her non-opposable thumbs downloaded 1,000 pictures and saved them in a special folder. That fucking cat is a genius, if so.
And a pervert. God. And a pervert. You've got to get rid of this cat immediately.
Oh my
God.
A predator. That is ridiculous. Sorry. I really thought it just said pornography, so my bad. Number 2, or this is, we're leading up to the top of the 10 list.
Okay.
Number 2 is, this is not my word. The prostitute was going to show me where to get tomatoes. He wasn't picking up. This 39-year-old man was not picking up a sex worker. She was simply going to show him where the tomatoes were. And I bet she was right here and right here. Okay. Number 1.
Sounds saucy.
I don't know. We're going to have to read this one too because I don't know what this means.
Okay.
Number 1 was, I was looking for Islamic State militants in the parking lot.
Oh.
A Mississippi woman was arrested by police officers for breaking into cars at her children's high school. This is how it all started. Police authorities were inundated with complaints of stolen property at the high school. This made officers launch a careful investigation in order to determine who was responsible for the crime. Lisa Roche was so careless at the crime scene that police officers were able to witness her actually committing the crime. When the officers informed her about what they had seen with their own eyes,
yes,
seeing that she could not possibly defend what she had done, she claimed that she had been watching the news recently, which was dominated by the mention of the Islamic State. She said that she was very terrified of Islamic State militants, so she took it upon herself to check the parking lot in order to find and flush out any terrorists that might be hiding there. Unfortunately, the police officers rejected her argument, and she was charged with commercial burglary of an automobile and taken to the Jackson County Adult Detention Center. It should be noted, there were no terrorists found in the parking lot or anywhere within the school premises.
I love that they added that. Yes. Just so y'all know, we checked the conspiracy out. So.
What? Racist fuck, like what just makes me like I'm gonna flush him out. I was checking in the console, center console of this Buick.
The U.S. government actually specifically requested your assistance in this mission. She can't tell us about it because it was an MI6 thing. Right. The British were involved. She had to destroy. She ate the capsule. She exploded. Yeah.
If she had told you about it, she'd have to kill you.
Oh,
so it was top secret.
Well, thank you for bathing me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for your amazing 2-part episode. We hope you guys enjoyed this. You got hours of content.
Don't worry, I won't do it again. I'll sit and listen to Charnell.
No,
it hurts my brain.
I love it when I get to sit and be the listener instead of the giver. So sometimes I like to take it too, Megan. I don't always have to give it.
Good. I like that.
Oh, shit. All right. We hope you guys keep listening even after I made that comment. And keep it curious, right, Megan?
Until next time, I want you to keep it curious.
Yeah. And keep listening. And bye-bye.
Bye-bye.